Welcome back to The Explainer. I am absolutely thrilled you're tuning in today because we're unpacking what is honestly one of the most fascinating hardware evolutions in modern consumer tech. We're going to map out the massive, spec-heavy evolution of Apple's iconic tablet lineup. It's this crazy story of raw silicon power, branching consumer needs, and an ecosystem that has grown incredibly complex over the last 15 years.
I mean, just think about this for a second. We started back in 2010 with this single, highly focused glass slate. The original iPad? It had just 256 megabytes of RAM. Fast forward to today, and we're looking at this expansive ecosystem powered by the exact same M-series silicone that literally runs heavy-duty professional laptops. So how on earth did we get from a basic media consumption device to an absolute computational juggernaut? Well, that's exactly what we're going to visually untangle today.
Okay, let's dive straight into this. Here is our roadmap for today. First, the iPad family tree. Second, the accessible everyday iPads. Third, Air and Pro powerhouses. Fourth, the silicon brain evolution. And lastly, lifespans and OS longevity.
Starting off with Section 1, the iPad family tree, branching out into 4 distinct lineages.
So in 2010, the base iPad launched the whole category. But the thing is, just 2 years later, in 2012, the tree branched out with the iPad mini. Then, in 2013, Apple introduced the iPad Air, which was followed by the very first iPad Pro in 2015. It's kind of wild to realize that within just 5 short years, the fundamental architecture of the massive ecosystem we see today was already set in stone.
So why do we actually have these 4 different branches? Well, it all comes down to vastly different consumer needs. As you can see, the base iPad is built for everyday general use, browsing, reading, maybe some light gaming. The iPad mini, that one prioritizes ultimate portability. It just fits easily right in one hand. Then we've got the iPad Air sitting right in the middle, offering mid-tier performance for students and creators who really need that power but without the absolute top-end price tag. And the iPad Pro, that is your ultimate laptop replacement for heavy-duty professional workflows. Honestly, understanding this matrix makes navigating your own tech choices so much easier.
Moving right along to Section 2, the accessible everyday iPads, the base and mini models. Right here on the left, we've got the 11th generation base iPad, featuring a pretty generous 10.9-inch display and powered by the A16 chip. But then look on the right, that's the 7th generation iPad mini. Sure, it has a much smaller 8.3-inch display, but look at the silicon inside. It packs an incredibly powerful A17 Pro chip. This is just a fantastic illustration of how physical size totally doesn't dictate computing power in this ecosystem. The Mini is incredibly portable, yet it seriously punches way above its weight class when it comes to pure speed. Now, despite their differences in screen real estate and the specific generation of their processors, both the base and Mini families serve as the highly accessible backbone of the entire ecosystem. They're unified by familiar features like Touch ID for security. They both rely on that A-series silicon lineage that was originally designed for the iPhone, and they really maintain this core approachability that makes them absolutely perfect for casual use, education, and reading. Let's move to and see how this builds in Section 3, Air and Pro powerhouses. The transition to laptop-grade performance. When we compare the absolute top-of-the-line models side by side, the distinctions become incredibly specific. The 8th generation iPad Air boasts a blazing fast M4 chip, retains Touch ID, and features Wi-Fi 7. But the moment you step up to the 8th generation iPad Pro, you cross a serious threshold. You get the ultra-advanced M5 chip, the biometric upgrade to Face ID, and professional-grade Thunderbolt connectivity for driving high-end external displays and massive data transfers. Basically, the Pro isn't just a tablet anymore, it's a full-on workstation. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is this specific hardware feature right here, the LiDAR scanner. This is a technology exclusively reserved for the Pro lineup. Basically, it fires out light to measure the exact distance to objects, which allows for incredibly fast and precise depth sensing. It completely transforms how the iPad Pro handles augmented reality and 3D mapping. It's exactly this kind of specialized, high-end sensor that strictly separates the Pro family from the Air. All right, Section 4, the silicon brain evolution, from A4 to M5. Let's peel back the glass for a minute and look at the actual systems on chip, the all-in-one processors that make all of this possible. Guys, the leap in raw memory capacity here is just staggering. The original A4 chip back in 2010 had just 256 megabytes of RAM. By 2017, the A10X pushed that up to 4 gigabytes. And by the time we hit the M5 chip, we're seeing up to 16 gigabytes of unified memory. That means the processor and graphics share the exact same hyperfast memory pool. Do the math on that really quick. Jumping from 256 megabytes to 16 gigabytes is a 64 times multiplier in memory capacity in just a decade and a half. That is the kind of leap that fundamentally redefines what a device can even do. And I want to highlight another absolutely crucial metric here, 16. This number represents the 16-core neural engine integrated into modern M-series chips. This dedicated architecture is capable of up to 38 trillion operations per second, or TOPS. It is built specifically for machine learning and artificial intelligence tasks. That is a computational concept that practically didn't even exist when the first tablet rolled off the assembly line in 2010. It's wild. And this brilliantly illustrates the whole architectural journey. The ecosystem started on a 32-bit architecture with the A4. Then, the A7 chip introduced a massive industry shift over to 64-bit processing, essentially doubling the data lanes. Finally, we get the integration of the M-series chips from M1 all the way up to M5, which has completely blurred the line between mobile and desktop computing. With that move, the iPad was no longer just a mobile device. It had evolved into a true computational powerhouse. Which brings us to Section 5, Lifespans and OS Longevity, the hidden story of software endurance. I have to say, these numbers are just phenomenal. Just look at the iPad Mini 2 and the first-generation iPad Air. Both of these were released in November 2013, right? And their software security support didn't formally wrap up until January 2026. That is a staggering 12 years and 2 months of lifespan support. Even the iPad Air 2 clocks in at 11 and a half years. In the consumer electronics world, where we're used to devices being obsolete in, 3 years, this kind of endurance is practically unheard of. But of course, none of that hardware longevity really matters without the software evolving right alongside it. The original iPad actually launched running a slightly modified version of iPhone OS 3.2. But as the underlying silicon became exponentially more powerful, the software simply had to break away. It evolved from iOS to the fully dedicated iPad OS, eventually culminating in versions like iPad OS 26, which are specifically designed to take full advantage of those M-series chips, advanced multitasking, and professional app environments. So the crucial point here is exactly how Apple determines these support lifespans. Obsolescence isn't strictly about the age of the device, it's really about the architecture. Notice those 4 models that are unsupported 32-bit devices. They were left behind simply because the software moved completely to 64-bit. As the underlying silicon requirements leap forward, older architectures literally just cannot keep up with the heavy demands of the modern OS. So what you should really take away from all of this is quite simple. When you're looking at a spec sheet, you aren't just looking at how fast a web page is going to load today. Raw specs actually dictate how long a device remains useful to you. Buying an iPad with an advanced laptop-grade M-series chip isn't just about getting premium performance right now. It's fundamentally an investment in potentially a decade or more of software support and security. We've seen the hardware leap 64 times in memory capacity, the software branch off into its own dedicated desktop-class OS, and the hardware endure for over a decade. So I'm going to leave you with this final question to ponder. With laptop-grade M5 chips and lifespans that frankly rival the best desktop computers, is the modern iPad actually still a tablet? Or has it evolved into something else entirely? Think about that the next time you tap that glass screen. Thank you so much for joining me on this explainer,